Hello and welcome to Herbert Miniatures. My name is Aidan, and in this video I'm going to be going through the tips and tricks that I use to paint the Red Gobbo and Bounca from Warhammer Commemorative Series. So let's get to it. The first stage is of course to open the box. I don't mean that sarcastically or cynically, I mean it as a practical step. The sprue itself was very nice. I thought as a Christmas themed miniature and from the Commemorative Series, it was a very good high quality model as always. This was originally a gift from my wife a few Christmases ago, and one I've not really gotten around to. So first steps are to dismantle, clean up any mold lines, glue. Accordingly, I decided to do some sub-assemblies, so the front mouthpiece and the body will be separate when it comes to painting. Everything glued together really nicely. I use Tamiya cement. It's great quality glue, and it does a great job. After undercoating with Wraith-bone from Citadel, I undercoated the side of the mouth and the gums with Citadel's Grima Pink, and that was to provide the initial base coat for what was required. Next, I moved on to Citadel Pink Horror, which allowed me to pick out some of the details and add a little bit of texture into the mouth. As you can see, I'm using a linear pattern, which just emphasizes the direction that I want this particular texture to go and how I want it to look. I did a wash of Carroburg Crimson after that, just to bring all of the colors together and to provide a little bit of muted tone. This helps to blend some of the aspects together. I went over some of the raised edges after this wash with Pink Horror again, just to pick out some of the detail associated. Again, following the texture that I'm making and ensuring that everything pops. Then after that, I applied a final highlight of Emperor's Children to everything that was there. Again, this is just to emphasize very, very strongly that I want the areas to be visible and building up the layers of pink inside the mouth and also on the gums. So this will aid with things later, drawing attention to the teeth in particular. So just continue following the gums as we've been doing before, picking out those lines where you need and putting them to the raised edges in particular. Once both the inside of the mouth and the gums are painted, we want to glue the sub-assembly together. So I got my trusty Tamiya cement, glued them, pushed them together, and job's good'n. Next, we're going to focus on the robes and various other details of the Red Gobbo himself. So we're using Citadel's Mephiston Red to get all of the base tones down as quickly as possible. And you may need one or two coats of this if you're using a wet palette. Make sure as well, if you're picking any particular details like I am with the baubles, that you find and paint them accordingly. So use as many coats as you feel comfortable to build a solid colour. Next stage is to paint all of the base tones for the skin of the Red Gobbo. So I used Citadel's Warflesh for this, as it provides a very orcish-like tone. So make sure to focus on the face, hands, and any other additional details such as baubles. So I chose the tail bauble and one on the base. And at this stage, we can also go back to the little tree branch and fill in the greens there as well. Next, I used Citadel Corax White to touch up areas of the base, just to go over some areas where I had some paint overlap from various other colours. I also used this white to block in some of the details on the Christmas hat itself. So the little bauble at the end, his little cutesy beard, and the ruffles of his coat. So we want them to be a good solid white at this particular stage. I also took this time to do some freehand around the dynamite. Next, I started using Tooth and Coat's Deathclaw to paint the various Christmassy details on his robes and the claws on Bounca. Following that, I used Dawnstone to paint the plume of smoke. I used Tooth and Coat's Dragon's Gold for the Christmas star on his hat, the bauble earring, and the Christmas star on the little branch at the back. Honestly, these are some of the best metals I've ever used in painting in 20 years. They go on so cleanly. And I made sure to pick out the grenades as well, one on the base and one in his back pocket. Finally, I used Sir Coates Silver to go over any metallic bits that I've got, which would be the bottom of the shoes, the gun, the antler bracket, and various other little details. Off camera, I used Citadel's Mournfang crown for the antlers, teeth, and branches, including a little gingerbread medal as well. I then utilised Ushabti bone to start painting over some of the bandages that you can see here. So this is just to provide the initial base tone and base colour needed. Next, we're going to apply Carroburg Crimson over any of the red areas of Bouncer and the Red Gobbo himself. We will also be applying Nuln oil to any of the metal, such as the gun that I'm doing here, and also the little earring for the bauble. We'll also apply this to the plume of smoke for something a little extra. For highlighting Bouncer's skin, I used Citadel's Evil Sun's Scarlet to pick out raised areas that to me drew some detail. So you can see here that I'm picking the knuckles of the feet. I think squigs have feet or paws, don't know. If you want to correct me, feel free. And also along the body itself, because there's lots of ripples and lines, I wanted to do a linear structure to follow that particular pattern. This draws more attention to Bouncer as we go along. Following that, I picked out Citadel's Wild Rider Red to paint over the boils and also to paint around the details of the lips and the nose. This draws attention to Bouncer's facial features where needed. And also I again picked out the paws or feet, whatever you want to call them for squigs, I don't know, and made sure that these particular highlights were followed as well. So as you can see, what I'm doing is picking out little areas that are needed here and there just to make it pop. Once all of these highlights were completed, I used Citadel's Bloodletter glaze, which sadly they don't sell anymore. But the purpose of using it was to unify all of the reds to make one cohesive colour. Next, we're going to use Citadel's Eshin Grey and Dawnstone to bring out a little bit of texture on the claws, make them look a bit more rugged. From the top of Bouncer's teeth down to the gums, using Ushabti bone, paint lines downwards. This will emphasise a little bit of texture. For the Red Gobbo himself, we don't need to worry about his gumbly little teeth, so we will just dab them in as needed. Once we've got that, we'll go over it again with Screaming Skull, this time going upwards. And again, for his gumbly little teeth, we don't really need to worry. These just need to be filled in slightly. We can use Ushabti Bone and Screaming Skull for additional details on the model as well, such as the medal, various little bandages, and just making sure that we capture as much detail as we can. So again, taking your time with a very small brush, just go over the edges with Ushabti Bone and then follow up with Screaming Skull. Moving on to some small details, I picked up Citadel's Deathclaw Brown and went over the gingerbread medal just to highlight a little bit, and then followed up with Citadel's Seraphim Sepia. I also applied Sepia onto the teeth. This is to try and blend all of the colours together because we don't want any of the teeth to look pearly white. I then reapplied Screaming Skull onto the very edges of the teeth. And again, focusing on gumbly little teeth, we just need to do little dots here and there. Using Sepia for one last time, we blend all of these colours together to just offer a bit more of a rugged smile. With the mouth done, we can also take this opportunity to attach the branch. Now we can move on to using Warboss Green to apply highlights to the Red Gobbo's skin. So to do this, what you need to do is see where the light hits, find those areas on various parts of the model, such as the hands, his nose, ears, etc., and make sure to apply this highlight sparingly. So again, just find where the light hits and apply it as needed. To unify all of the colours, we use Citadel's Waywatcher Green Glaze. We also want to take this opportunity to give the tree branch some attention. Following this, I could move on to Bouncer's Eyes using an initial layer of Uriel Yellow, followed by a Cassandra Yellow shade, and then a Citadel Lamenters Yellow Glaze. This is in an attempt to unify all of the colours together, make them all more cohesive as much as possible. For the Red Gobbo's goggles, I used Calgar blue initially to fill in the blue colour that's required, followed by a Drakenhof Nightshade to add some shading. And finally, I used another dab of Calgar blue to add a spot of highlight to the goggles. Currently, the Red Gobbo's Christmas coat and hat are looking a little flat, so using Citadel's Evil Sun Scarlet and linear motion using the spotlight that I have for painting, I applied a sort of makeshift highlight that I've not seen anyone else do to make the jacket look like it has a thread count. And by doing this, it just applies that nice little bit of extra detail and depth to the mini itself. We can also apply some red stripes to the Gold Star medal too. Using a very, very steady hand, I applied 2 thin coats Death Reaper as the pupils of the eyes for Bouncer. I also used this to pick out some minor details such as the strap for the beard and also the cable for the Christmas lights running along the branch that's attached to Bouncer's mouth and also on the base itself. Do take your time with this one because there are numerous little details that could easily be missed. For the beard's shading, this was a little bit of a challenge to try and add some depth to the beard. So what I did is I mixed Citadel's Nuln Oil and Drakenhof Nightshade together to make a 1-to-1 mix. And this was also applied to all of the ruffles and bauble bits of the Red Gobbo's coat. Using specifically Citadel's White Scar Air, we can apply highlights to the beard, but also apply some texture-based highlights to the various ruffles and details of the coat. So just dot in little bits here and there, and what you want to do after all of this is to make sure that you go over all of this with the same White Scar Air. For any wood-based textures, I applied a wash of Agrax Earthshade, and we also applied this to the tree on the base, including the leaves. Following that, I used Carroburg Crimson to make the grenades look a little bit more aged. So once this has been applied, I then used 2 thin coats Glistening Gold to apply some highlights. And this was also applied to areas that I didn't want to look a bit more aged, such as the star on the hat and the bauble earring. And for the star on the tree, I made sure to follow the natural pattern of the star where light was catching accordingly. This emphasizes the star's shape. For any of the metallics, I applied 2 thin coats Mithril Blade as a highlight. And this was catching any of the areas that I felt needed a little bit of sparkle. Now, you could go overboard like me if you really want to, but you don't have to. The main focus should be any raised edges that would capture light naturally. Finally, for the textural highlight of any wooded areas, I used Citadel's Scrag Brown as a dry brush wherever it was needed. Final details were to apply some White Scar Air to the fuse and the bottom of the plume of smoke, followed by a layer of Green Stuff World's Flora Orange. For the lights glow, I used Citadel's Technical Tesseract Glow, and I used Citadel's Valhalla Blizzard to apply some actual snow texture to the base on top of the white we painted earlier. I used small dabs of Citadel's Uriel Yellow for the lights, and finally I applied 2 thin coats Death Reaper to the edge of the base for that final finish, and we can call the Red Gobbo and Bounca done. And there we have it. Thank you all so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed, please do leave a like and a comment. And if you'd like to see any more, please be sure to subscribe to the channel. Thank you all again for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Take care for now.